On January 24th, 1848, a carpenter named James Marshall was building a sawmill near a river in California. He looked down into the water and saw something glittering at the bottom. He reached in and picked up a small yellow rock. That one moment, that one small yellow rock, changed the entire history of the United States forever. Within 2 years, 300,000 people had left their homes, their families, their entire lives behind, chasing that same glitter in the water. Most of them died trying. This is the story of the California Gold Rush, the most dramatic, most brutal, and most world-changing treasure hunt in human history. A story of ordinary men who became millionaires overnight, and millionaires who died penniless in the dirt. A story that built an entire nation on the foundation of gold pulled from rivers and mountains with bare hands. And it all started with one man, one river, and one small yellow rock. James Marshall was a quiet man, a carpenter by trade. In January 1848, he was building a sawmill for a man named John Sutter at a place called Coloma on the American River in Northern California. On the morning of January 24th, Marshall was inspecting the water channel when he noticed something strange. Small yellow flakes glittering at the bottom of the river. He picked one up. It was heavy, heavier than it should be for its size. He bit it. It did not crack. He hammered it. It did not shatter. It bent. Marshall rode immediately to John Sutter's office, burst through the door, and placed the yellow flake on the table. Sutter looked at it, then looked at Marshall, then picked up a book on minerals and metals. He tested it with acid. The flake did not react. Sutter looked up slowly and said 2 words. It's gold. But how does gold end up in a river? This is where the story gets truly fascinating. Gold does not simply appear in rivers by accident. It is born deep underground, millions of years ago, when hot liquid rock called magma pushes up through cracks in the Earth's surface. As the magma cools, gold crystallizes inside the rock. These gold-filled rocks are called gold veins. Over millions of years, rain, wind, and water slowly break down these rocks. The gold inside is released and washes down into rivers and streams. Because gold is extremely heavy, it sinks to the bottom of the river and collects in cracks and crevices in the riverbed. This is called placer gold. And in 1848 California, the rivers were absolutely full of it. Thousands of years of gold washing down from the Sierra Nevada mountains had collected in the riverbeds of Northern California, just sitting there, waiting for someone to notice. Sutter begged Marshall to keep the discovery secret. He was afraid of what would happen if word got out. He was right to be afraid. Within weeks, workers at the sawmill were secretly panning for gold instead of working. By March 1848, a newspaper in San Francisco published a small article about the discovery. Nobody believed it. Then, in May 1848, a man named Sam Brannan walked through the streets of San Francisco holding a bottle of gold dust above his head, shouting at the top of his lungs, "Gold! Gold! Gold from the American River!" Within 3 days, San Francisco was empty. Every shop closed, every business abandoned. Even the newspaper that had published the original story shut down temporarily because all its workers had left for the gold fields. By the end of 1848, the news had spread across America and across the entire world. In 1849, they came from every corner of America, from Europe from China, from Australia, from South America. They were called the 49ers, named for the year they arrived. 300,000 people in less than 2 years. They came by ship, they came by wagon, they came on foot. The journey alone killed thousands of them. Ships sank in storms. Wagons broke down in deserts. Men died of cholera, scurvy, and starvation before they ever saw a single flake of gold. But still, they came. Because the stories coming out of California were impossible to ignore. Men were pulling hundreds of dollars worth of gold from rivers in a single day, at a time when the average American worker earned $1 per day. One man reportedly found a single gold nugget weighing 195 pounds. 195 pounds of pure gold, worth millions of dollars in today's money, found in a river with his bare hands.
So how exactly did they get the gold out of the rivers and mountains? The earliest and simplest method was called gold panning. A miner would take a wide, shallow metal pan, scoop up sand and gravel from the riverbed, add water, and swirl it in a circle. Because gold is so heavy, it sinks to the bottom of the pan, while the lighter sand and gravel wash over the edge. After several minutes of swirling, if you were lucky, small golden flakes would remain at the bottom of the pan. It sounds simple. It was not. A skilled miner could process around 50 pans per day. Each pan might contain a few cents worth of gold, or nothing at all. But occasionally, a pan would contain something remarkable. A nugget. A solid piece of gold the size of a marble, or a walnut, or occasionally, much, much larger. As more miners arrived, they developed more sophisticated methods. The rocker box, the long tom, and eventually, hydraulic mining, where they used massive water cannons to blast entire mountains apart, washing the gold-filled rock down into collection systems. This method was so powerful and so destructive that it completely reshaped the landscape of California. Mountains that had stood for millions of years were simply washed away.
But raw gold pulled from a river is not pure. It is mixed with sand, dirt, and other minerals. To clean it, miners used mercury, a silver liquid metal that has a unique property. It attracts gold and bonds with it. Miners would pour mercury over their collected material. The mercury would absorb all the gold, forming a mixture called an amalgam. They would then heat the amalgam, burning off the mercury, leaving behind relatively pure gold. This process worked, but it was extremely dangerous. Mercury vapor is deadly. Thousands of miners suffered mercury poisoning without ever knowing what was killing them. The cleaned gold was then weighed and taken to assay offices, where it was tested for purity, melted down, and formed into gold bars and coins. The standard measure was the troy ounce, and in 1849, 1 troy ounce of gold was worth around $18. By the peak of the rush, miners were pulling out an estimated $10 million worth of gold every single month.
But the gold rush had a very dark side. The Native American peoples of California had lived in the region for thousands of years. When the miners arrived, they were driven from their lands. Entire tribes were wiped out completely. It is one of the darkest chapters in American history. And the miners themselves, most of them never found significant gold. The rivers that had been so rich in 1848 were quickly picked clean by the sheer number of miners. By 1850, most of the easily accessible placer gold was gone. The men who got rich were often not the miners. They were the merchants, the men who sold the miners their supplies.
Shovels, pans, food, tents. A man named Levi Strauss came to California to sell canvas to miners. When that didn't work, he started making tough work pants from the canvas instead. He called them blue jeans. Levi's, a brand that exists to this day, worth billions of dollars, built entirely on the desperation of gold miners who needed strong pants that wouldn't tear while they worked.
Think about what these men gave up. They left their wives, their children, their homes, everything they had ever known, crossed oceans and deserts and mountains, chasing a dream of gold. Most of them returned home broke. Some never returned at all. But what they built in California was something more valuable than gold. They built cities. San Francisco grew from a small village of 200 people in 1846 to a bustling city of 36,000 people by 1852. They built roads. They built banks. They built schools. They built an entire state. California became the 31st state of America in 1850, just 2 years after that carpenter bent down into a river and picked up a small yellow rock. Between 1848 and 1855, an estimated 750,000 pounds of gold was extracted from California, worth over $2 billion in today's money. The gold rush transformed California from a wilderness into one of the most powerful economies in the world. Today, California alone has the 5th largest economy on Earth, larger than the entire economies of the United Kingdom, India, and France. All of it built on the foundation of gold pulled from rivers with tin pans and bare hands.
James Marshall, the carpenter who started it all, never got rich. He was chased away from his own discovery by the thousands of miners who flooded the area. He spent the rest of his life moving from place to place, trying to find another gold strike. He died in 1885, alone and penniless, in a small cabin not far from the river where he had found his first golden flake. The river that had made 300,000 people leave everything they had. The river that had built an entire state. The river that had changed the history of a nation. James Marshall died with almost nothing. But the world he accidentally created by bending down into that river on a cold January morning is still here, still running, still glittering in the sunlight. Just like that first small yellow rock he held in his hand 175 years ago.
If this story moved you, you are not alone. Subscribe to Hidden History Vault for more real stories of forgotten moments that changed the world. Because history is not just dates and facts. It is real people, real decisions, real consequences. And there is so much more still buried out there.